Defensive tackles impact the game in two different ways, rushing the passer and stuffing the run. Is Aaron Donald the GOAT of defensive tackle prospects? We'll discuss it next on the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson, always on the ones and twos. You can find and follow me on Twitter at DP_NFL. I'm a national scout over with the Draft Network and your favorite and local running back guru. And as always, Mr. LSU himself, the Tiger, my guy, the champion, Keith Sanchez. Man, you can find and follow him on Twitter at The Talent Code. Keith, talk to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, senior draft analyst with the Draft Network, man, and 2019 national champ with those LSU Bengal Tigers. But you know why we're here every single day? Myself, Damian Parsons, that's to bring you championship level content surrounding the NFL draft, whether that's rosters, whether that's philosophies, whether that's depth charts, whether that's different perspectives surrounding this NFL draft. Like we say, man, this is a 24/7, 365 job. The draft does not stop. We want your team to be great, win a Super Bowl. It all starts with the draft with DP. Like we said, man, we're in this portion of the year where we're doing a little bit of revisionist history, right? And we did the edge rushers yesterday. Now we're going on to those defensive tackles, right? A position that is always been impactful, but I feel like it's growing in popularity amongst the fans, right? Like those big nasties, they're starting to get a little bit more, maybe some more marketing dollars pushed their way, right? They're starting to be faces of the franchises. Yep. I think it's very exciting. But what we want to do is we want to go over the top 5 defensive tackles that have come out of the NFL draft. Like we said, this is not revisionist history from the perspective of, hindsight is 2020 and these are the top 5 D tackles in the NFL. We're talking about NFL draft prospects, so what they did in college and leading up into the NFL draft, guys that we thought were the 1 through 5 top defensive tackles over the past 10 years. But DP, before we get into that, man, I want you to hit them with one of our title sponsors.
Today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/lockedonnfl and they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti style tumbler with every order. Ranking these guys, as I continue to say, it's not easy, but this one was a little bit easy at the top for me, Keith. And it's not even revisionist history because when you look at what he did in college, he was still an animal then as he is an animal now. So I'm gonna kick mine off. Aaron Donald at number 1. The cat's out the bag. Aaron Donald at number 1. Quinnen Williams from Alabama at number 2. Jalen Carter at number 3 from Georgia. Vita Vea at number 4. And Deron Payne at number 5.
Okay, I'm going to go with mine. I had Jeffrey Simmons at number 1. When Jeffrey Simmons, that is always somebody to miss, man.
I always forget somebody.
I had Jeffrey Simmons. Then I had Derek Brown, what he did at Auburn. I thought that was very impactful, man. I thought that was very impactful. Mm-hmm. Then I had Aaron Donald at 3. Then I had Quinnen Williams. And then I had Javon Kinlaw, man. Which I'm so glad I put my list out, because listen, I have some misses, right? They're not misses, but definitely some names that maybe they didn't live up to the hype, especially with the Javon Kinlaw. That is a natural head scratcher for me. And because Derek Brown and Javon Kinlaw, they were in the same draft, right? And Javon Kinlaw coming out of South Carolina, Derek Brown coming out of Auburn. I'll tell you this. I watching Derek Brown because that was their 2019 year. That was his, last year at Auburn. And I won't forget the play. We were backed up against our goal line. And Derek Brown, he playing defensive tackle, he long arm bull rush our interior offensive lineman, a guard, into Joe Burrow for the sack. And I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm like, that's just different. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a play. I would just never forget that play, right? I'm like, that was one grown man pushing another grown man with one arm into the quarterback for the sack. So he didn't even touch Joe Burrow. He made the offensive lineman touch Joe Burrow. And that offensive line was one of our strong offensive linemen. I'm pretty sure he was drafted in the top 3-4 rounds in the NFL draft too. So you're talking about a good football player. But when
I can't remember the name, but I know exactly the player you're talking about.
I don't know why. As soon as you said that, I just Damian Lewis. I just blanked.
Yes.
I think it was the Damian Lewis, Lord Cushenberry combination, and both very high level caliber football players. Starting in the NFL right now, but just watching Derrick Brown do that to another man, I was just like, that was amazing. But DP at my list, I as much as I wanted to put Aaron Donald 1, right, and that's what I had to kind of go through this process was. As we grow in this draft process, and we're talking about the helmets, right? And Aaron Donald coming out of Pittsburgh, but then you got guys like Quinnen Williams coming out of Alabama. You know what I'm saying? And obviously, Aaron Donald is the better player up until this point. Hall of Fame career, probably the best. Some would say he's the best defensive tackle ever. But I just knew that I kind of went. I had to try to check myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, how did you feel about Aaron Donald at that moment? And I thought he'd be a good player. But maybe more, and I'm bring up another name, Ed Oliver, right? I think people kind of put them in the same bracket as far as their capabilities, but Aaron Donald should probably be a different level.
No, 100%. And I think for me, man, I just remember watching Aaron Donald, and I questioned myself watching him when he was at Pitt. I was like, this dude, like I remember Googling his weight. I was like, how big is this guy? How tall is this guy? But you just watched him be quicker, stronger, faster, more refined in terms of his hand usage than everybody he faced. And then you looked at the numbers, you know what I'm saying, over, especially the 3 years after his freshman year, 29, it was what, 27 and a half sacks over 3 years. And this, the number is crazy, but it's tackles for loss over his entire career. So he had 29 and a half sacks over 4 years, 6 total forced fumbles, 66 tackles for loss. So it was like, when they say the proof is in the pudding, the proof is absolutely in the pudding of a guy when we look at, and that's why the Ed Oliver, I'm gonna tell you, in my personal opinion, I feel like when you brought Ed Oliver, I feel like he got drafted so high because I've been watching him. I wasn't like, I was like, nope, I don't see it with him, right? And this kind of translates to the NFL, even though the Buffalo Bills paid him, I still don't see it. But he got drafted high because of AD.
Yeah, that was kind of my point, right? That I think that when Aaron Donald got drafted, I thought people expected Ed Oliver production.
Yep.
And then Ed Oliver got drafted really high because of Aaron Donald's production, right? Like it kind of worked in a weird way. It works backwards, right? But that's the NFL. It's a monkey see, monkey do type situation. Everybody's trying to replicate something, and I don't know when we're gonna stop just saying that this player is this player, right? But man, DP, that top 5 list, I thought it was it was fun, right? Because you're still able to kind of go down there, pitch out some names, and like you said, it's a situation where I think this position is becoming a premium position, right? I think back in the day, it wasn't that, right, and it was overlooked, but now it's becoming a premium position for defenses, and just their impact, because you have guys that can stop the run, but then also rush the passer, which Aaron Donald has led that into. And man, this guy has been so impactful. I talked about it on our last, was that episode ago or 2 episodes ago, when I talked about the Duke Manyweather camp, and I talked about how it was Lane Johnson and it was Creed Humphrey and it was all these Pro Bowl guys. All of them talked about how to try to defeat Aaron Donald. That was like half of the 2-day seminar was how do you defeat Aaron Donald. So
that's respect.
That's respect. And I promise you, his name was brought up like 10 different times. How do you defeat Aaron Donald? Matter of fact, the center for the Ryan Jensen, the center for the Bucs, he brought him up and was like, man, the first time he got after me, right? And it's like I stayed up the entire night before the next time that we faced him, and you just hear those conversations and you're like, man, this guy is not only, he's not just like a fan favorite, but he's so respected amongst his peers because he just wins, right? And I wouldn't even call it fear, because you're talking about with those offensive linemen that were speaking, right? Those are the like Pro Bowl guys, so they don't fear anybody, but they just respected his craft so much, and it just always came up. But DP, there was one point that I hit on, and I talked about rushing the passer, and I talked about run stoppers, right? And it seems that there's starting to be a divide, amongst the two, right? Like it's starting to be like, okay, hey, draft this guy because he has high pass rush ability, a la Kalijah Cansey, right? Then you're saying, hey, draft this guy because of run defense, and you go back a year ago, right? And we're talking about Jordan Davis. So we want to get into that conversation, like, hey, as the defensive tackle positions, what do you rather have, right? Do you rather a guy that can rush the passer, or do you rather a guy that can stop the run for today's NFL offense? So coming up next, man, we're gonna get into this pass rush versus run defense conversation.
Guys, trying to find pants and/or shorts that fit well, they're comfortable, flexible, and versatile. It's not easy. I can promise you, and I can tell you about personal experience. But let me tell you about Bird Dogs. Let me introduce you. They make me look good, and I believe they'll help you look good as well. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and the leg, give you a truly sculpted look. Their shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. They also fit better than all those regular shorts that use restricting cotton that's stiff in our closets. Why do they fit better? Why are they better than those shorts? Because they use a cloud knit fabric that looks just like khakis, but they stretch and give you the way slimmer fit without sacrificing movement. Bird Dogs use an anti-stinking sweat wicking fabric that will keep you cool and dry all day long. So guys, listen to me. Let me help you out here. All you got to do is go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You will not want to take off your Bird Dogs. We promise you. I said it the other day, Keith. I opened up the second segment with it. The chicken or the egg, you know what I mean? It's like what comes first, right? And you know, we go back a decade or more ago, teams want to Jordan, as you talked about, teams want to Jordan Davis first because they want to clog the middle of the defense. They want a two gap. They want to control and keep their linebackers clean, right? But now, like you said, a Kalijah Cansey who explosive, athletic, refinement in terms of his pass rush ability. But the run defense may be lacking a little bit. You don't want him reduced too far inside on 1st and 10 or not even 1st and 10, but like 3rd and 1. You might not want him to in that one tech, two eye situation. So it's like, where are you on the spectrum of in terms of building and adding defensive tackles to your roster if you're the GM? Are you prioritizing pass rush first or run defense?
Oh man, DP, this is a tough one because I went back and forth last night. You know, when you presented these two options, man, this is tough because I'm gonna bring up some names, have some conversations real quick, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you know, you have your Aaron Donalds, right, who's pass rush, but he's also high level against the run. But there's one name, and he's up for a contract year, and we're gonna get into this another when we go through our team roster situations, and that's Quinnen Williams, another guy that I seen get after our LSU defense, but he did it. Our LSU offensive line, but he did it in a totally different way than Derrick Brown, and that's because they're two totally different players, right? And Quinnen Williams was a guy that won with speed. He was a high level, I want to say athleticism, right? Very bendy guy. Had all of the hand counters and maneuvers and things like that to beat interior offensive lineman. I think he might have had 2.5, 3 sacks or something like that. It was definitely his coming out party. That game in 2019, was it 2018? I think 2017. Yep. 2018 game. And he controlled that game. I believe that he won that game for Alabama because I believe it was a low scoring game also. But when I watched him in the NFL, DP, and you remember this in when I was scouting meetings, I'm like, man, because before this year, this was his breakout year, but before this year, it was very minimal sacks. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but I was like, I just don't feel him. Like, I just don't feel Quinnen right now, especially him being a top 5 pick. And when he was drafted, right, I thought that was warranted, right? I seen what he did in my LSU defense, but that's where this divide really comes, right? Pass rush versus run defense. And I think in this Robert Saleh defense, this was the first time that Quinnen Williams just kind of ran upfield, right? Ran upfield, used athleticism and try to get after the quarterback. But I do have question marks with the run defense. So to answer your question, DP, if I had to have a prototype guy, it would be a guy that can rush the passer, but with strength, right? Like using bull rushes. Because I just can't sacrifice it and have a soft defensive tackle in the middle. I just can't. Yeah. I can't do that. You know what I'm saying? But I do want you to give some type of presence rushing a passer. So if I had just one of those big like Jeffrey Simmons type guys where they rush the passer via bull rushes and things like that, like where their functional strength is on display, I would rather that.
I don't blame you for it, man. I'm still mad at myself for forgetting about Jeffrey Simmons. You know what I mean? Like it was so hard, bro. It was so hard compiling 5 out of these guys. But no, I'm with you. I think for me, it's very similar to what you talk about, right? Like I want a guy that could do both. I want a guy that could be athletic, right? And nimble and agile, like we talk about with Quinnen, because Quinnen being it's like 6'3", 6'4", 300 pounds. And I know exactly what you're talking about. Quick feet, dude can kind of slice and dip into gaps and just be elusive. You know what I mean? And then you see flashes of power when he locks out and drives, but it's just never been the top of his game. It's always been athleticism. Yeah, it's not his bread and butter. But when you look at a guy like, you look at the reps we've seen over like this for 1 year as a full-time starter, and even the year before with Jalen Carter. That's the guy I would say, like for me, if you say pass rush over defense, and this pains me because I'm a running back, right? Because you know what I mean? If you got a small defensive line, I'm going to run the rock. You know what I mean? We saw that last year with teams, but I do say it's still a passing league, and I got to get after Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. So I need a pass rusher, and there's no better. As much as Von Miller and Myles Garrett, who we highlighted, and T.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney, as impactful those guys are, they'll never be more impactful than Aaron Donald because he can win, and when he wins quick, he's right in the face of your quarterback. He's right into the face of the QB, and he's in that passing lane. That's right.
That's why I kind of went back and forth on the DP, because they say the quickest path anywhere, right, is in a straight line. You know what I'm saying? And like you say, that's why your Aaron Donalds, they're so impactful. Quinnen Williams had a good year this past year rushing the quarterback.
13 sacks.
Yeah. So it was a lot of production there. DP. It's just tough, right, when you get into that conversation, because this is the other thing, right? I try to bring a statistic once every couple episodes, but I was watching ESPN. I think it was ESPN or Twitter, right? And they were talking about that this is the first year that the 21 personnel, right? So 2 running backs, 1 tight end. So a heavier, it basically just for our listeners, for those that don't know, it indicates more run, right? Like it indicates bigger personnel on the field, more run. So this is the first year that the NFL through formations has indicated more run than it has in like the past 15 years. This is the first year where that trend didn't go down, it went up. You know what I'm saying? Like as far as that formation. So you just wonder, DP, if we're talking about in the future, right? And you talk about the San Francisco 49ers, you talk about the Titans, you talk about what the Cowboys did, you talk about the Eagles running the football. The Falcons are going to get after running football with Bijan Robinson. The Detroit Lions, they have a good offensive line going to run the football. The Cleveland Browns have a good offensive line. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. So you just wonder if this is going to be the first year, DP, where you're going to see more run, like where it's going to start to elevate. And then this conversation, instead of pass rushing defensive tackles, is going to go to the run stopper. So that's why that conversation is so difficult, man, because even with Kalijah Kancey, right, DP, like he went to the perfect spot for him, like being a complementary piece to Vita Vea, because when I watched him, I'm like, I like him, and I don't even know if I like him on the edges. I like him winning athletically at the interior defensive line position, but against the run, I couldn't help myself. I was the opposing offensive coordinator. They just run the ball at him. Like, let's double team. Let's work dual block to the linebacker. Right. Let's run at Kalijah Kancey, right? So it's just so many, nuanced conversations that can happen around this pass rush versus run stopping defensive tackle.
No, 100%. And to your point, like you talked, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's what we saw. We saw, and it started in 2021 where Tyreek Hill, I think he was still with the Chiefs, and defensive coordinators came into that season like, bruh, y'all not throwing shot plays against us this year. Mm-hmm. Like, we're not letting it happen. We're not giving up those 30, 40, 50-yard bombs. We're going to play cloud over the top. We're going to play 2 high safeties, and you're going to have to death by 1,000 cuts us. And if you win that way, fine, right? Like if you take away a boxer's strong hand, but he's a right-handed boxer, but he hook you with that left and drop you, you just got to take that. Because, hey, man, I didn't let you hook me with your strong hand, but he countered with the left. And that's what you wanted to make those offenses do. Mahomes, Josh Allen, all of you want to make those guys play in the condensed. You want to make them drive 12, 13 plays, right? And in 2022, we saw offenses say, well, okay, that's cool. You want to give us 7, 8 man fronts? Say less. You know what I mean? Because not only a defensive line smaller, linebackers are smaller too. Because linebackers nowadays are essentially just safeties. that you just added 10 pounds to, truthfully.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know what I mean? So it's like you're in that type of situation where teams ran the ball. So I would not be surprised, Keith, we fast forward a year from now and we go back to this discussion like, well, 2023, they ran the ball a lot more on these boys. You know what I mean? But again, right now, like you said, like as you said, I'd rather have a pass rush first. And again, if I'm a prototypical type of guy, I look at a Jalen Carter who, physical, he's manhandle guys, right? But he's super athletic, long. He does all the different things that you look for. So he's a complete type of player, and he's still young, so he hasn't even reached the peak of his skill set yet. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing to watch, guys. So, yeah, listen, for those on YouTube, holler at us in the comments. Would you rather have your pass rush defensive tackle, or would you rather have a guy that can stop the run? Talk to us. What's your philosophy? Holler at us in the comments on YouTube.
Yep, and keep this. I'm gonna make this last point before we transition real quick, DP. Talking about the Dallas Cowboys, right? Because they drafted one of, not this past year, but year before last, they drafted one of the best interior defensive linemen, in my opinion. You're talking about just one of those ox strong guys, John Ridgeway out of Arkansas. And I'm like, okay, this is what they needed. They needed a run stopper because they consistently run into the 49ers, teams like the Eagles, teams that run the football on them. And then they can't handle the run, right? Because they go after these. They usually have smaller, I think guys like Neville Gilmore, I believe, on a defensive line. And these are smaller defensive tackles that, get after the quarterback. They give you value rushing the quarterback. But when you're talking about just taking on double teams and being that strong interior defensive line presence, they're not there. But what did the Cowboys do? They drafted him and then they cut him. So it's just, then he went to the Commanders, right? And now he's playing good football as a run-stopping defensive tackle, which I'm just let, Jerry and the guys do their thing, right? Do their thing with the defensive line with DP. Man, we got one more element to this conversation, right? And that is 3-4 defensive tackles versus 4-3, because they with the alignment itself, right? It presents them with different responsibilities, and that comes with a different skill set, right? Or a different body type that you will want, and just a different philosophy, right? You always hear 3-4 or 4-3, but let's get into what type of defensive tackle fits that mold, because it's not with defensive tackle. It's not just like a every size fits all type situation, right? You need certain guys for certain situations. So I want to get into this 3-4 defensive tackle versus 4-3 defensive tackle conversation coming up next.
Defensive fits 3-4, 4-3. Keith, I'm gonna tell you right now. I absolutely hate 3-4 defense. Like, I don't like it.
That's crazy. That is crazy because I prefer it. Like, we on totally opposite sides of this.
I hate it.
We can make this a whole podcast. This needs to be a whole podcast. I prefer it, and and how you were talking about, like, when I was younger on Madden, I liked it, right? When I was like, 12, 13, 14, 15. Then, when I got to LSU, we were under Aranda, right? And he ran 3-4 a lot. So I seen different elements of it and things like that. I say this, even when I play Madden, DP, the 4-3 is like, it's too simple. Like, I feel like I know exactly what's going on. Like, I feel like the offense knows exactly what to do because everything is declared. But we'll save that conversation. We'll have a 3-4 versus 4-3 conversation for another podcast with DP. Let's focus back on these defensive tackles, man, and just where we're going with this.
I mean, the big difference between the two defensive fronts in terms of D tackles is, with the 4-3, you can have a little bit more variety in terms of D tackles with the foot, because you're gonna have two interior defensive linemen. You're gonna have two D tackles on the 4-3. So you can have a big Jordan Davis type as like your one tech, zero shade, and then you could put a Jalen Carter at the 3 tech, right? Where in the 3-4, Jordan Davis could still play 0 tech, because he's just that type of guy, right? The Jordan Davis, the Vince Wilforks of the world, those big physical guys that can maintain and contain gaps. 2-gap, which, for those who don't know what 2-gap means, is handling double teams and basically controlling 2 different gaps, where your linebackers, then they're free to flow and to shoot and shoot gaps and get into the backfield, blitz or what have you. And typically those 3-4 defensive tackles, don't expect much pass rush from them. Their
Yeah,
job is simple. Be a space eater, big fella. Like that's it. Tony Siragusa for the Ravens
I
back
was
when
just about to bring that name up.
you know what I'm saying. Ray Lewis, he kept Ray Lewis clean, and they got Haloti Nata. But remember, and then they had a tight back then because they drafted big Mountain Cody from Alabama that everybody thought was going to be the next one as that 3-4 nose tackle. It just didn't work out. But that's the biggest thing is that the body types and what you're asked to do in the 3-4, because you're typically by yourself. Yeah, you got those two defensive ends, but they're more of the 5-tech variety than depends on the formation that you're running. If it's tight, then yeah, you squeeze them down a little bit. But typically, if you're a 3-4 defensive tackle, you're a nose tackle, you and that bad boy battling by yourself half the time.
Yeah, you have to be a warrior, man, and it's almost like the offensive line position where nobody's gonna call your name, right? Because you're gonna have minimal production just because like your job is not to make the tackle, right? Your job is to beat the offensive lineman and kind of eat up space like you talked about, DP. And I'll say this, and I just kind of talked about 3-4 versus 4-3 and my preference. I'll be honest, right? Like if you're a defensive tackle, the 3-4 is not very it's not very kind to you. You know what I'm saying? Like you constantly have two guys lying on you. You know what I'm saying? Like just leaning on you all game long. It's a hell of a job to do, right? Like it's a hell of a job to do. But I'll agree with you, DP, that when you look at it, it's not very kind to the 3-4 defensive tackles.
Your linebackers get all the tackles and sacks.
Yeah,
and they get all the love from the
rushers,
media.
right?
And the edge rushers, and you just in there like, well, bro, y'all couldn't do none of this without me.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. I agree. So, and even to that, like we're talking about body types now, right? So this is when you get to your 330-poundish type players, your Vita Veas, your Danny Sheltons, Apu Ikas, Jordan Davis. You mentioned his name already because you don't need them to be. You don't need them to necessarily excel at being great athletes, right? It's all about their strength, their power, and then honestly, IQ, right? Like IQ is huge to be able to feel the flow, especially on those kind of, on those zone plays. You know what I'm saying? To kind of know what's going on. And then honestly, you need them to be selfless players, right? Like these are guys that, when you have these conversations, meetings with them, you need to know that, hey, like they know their role and they're in it for the long haul, for the productiveness, not of their individual selves, but for the entire defense, because they play such a huge part. Like you say, man, that's two linebackers standing right next to them. You know what I'm saying? And that's the middle of your defense, DP.
Yeah, and typically when you're in the 4-3, like I said, you got another running mate beside you, and you guys can really the twists and stunts, the interior defensive line game, the tackle and tackle stunts are a lot easier, and you have help where it's not as much rigor on the body of handling double teams. Now, one of you might get double teamed, but that like you tag team, you help the other. It's like, okay, y'all want to double team me? Well, Jordan Davis is like, well, that's fine, double team me, but your guard's gonna have to face Jalen Carter 1-on-1, and I'm taking Jalen Carter every time.
Yeah, and it's as simple as talking to offering a pass rush. It's based off of alignment too, right? In the 4-3. You're lined up in the gap already pretty much. You know what I'm saying? Like you're already in the gap, so you just got to go forward and you've already created penetration. But if you're a defensive tackle / nose tackle in a 3-4, I mean, you kind of lined up right over the center. So you have to go through a grown man to be able to get to the quarterback. So simply based off of alignment, the 4-3 as a defensive tackle, you should have more upside and it should be more available to you to get after the quarterback.
Yeah, much more freedom to attack. And like you said, get upfield, get vertical, and get into the face of the quarterback. But guys, listen, that's our discussion about these defensive tackles. Listen, the value may not have been there 10, 15 years ago, but this is a position that you want your team to invest in, because if you can't get pass rush through the middle, that means you got to blitz, you got to send extra guys. You don't want to do that, especially against guys like Mahomes and Allen and Lamar, guys that can get out of the pocket and stuff. You want to be able to get to them with forward, have an interior defensive lineman that can push the pocket and collapse the pocket in the face and the lap of the quarterback. that helps you get to the quarterback with 4. But guys, as always, we appreciate y'all for tapping in with us today. As always, go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. Get the latest episode as soon as it's available. Thank y'all for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every single day. Happy Friday to you as well. Forgot to tell you that at the beginning, but Monday, we talking corners, man. And listen, this might have been the most difficult thing for me to pick 5 cornerbacks. So we're going to have a nice discussion, and some guys are going to be left off. So we can't wait for you guys to check that out. So tap back in with us on Monday for Happy Monday. But as always, in terms of Twitter, you can find and follow Keith Sanchez at The Talent Code. Me, Damian Parson, find and follow me at DP_NFL. Come and join the conversation again on Monday morning on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team